Hello guys. Welcome back to another amazing fanfic story. First of all, a huge thank you for all the love and support on part 2. So many of you were asking for the next part in the comments, and because of your requests, I'm finally back with part 3. Kakashi-sama. Kakashi paused at those words as he turned to take in the rather cute-looking lackey the council had sent to catch him before leaving. 150 centimeters, early 20s, brunette hair done in a pleasing cut, brown no tan eyes, slim build, and would have been a spitting image for Amma from book 1 if it weren't for her nose. It was a shame as her rather strong nose instead of being cute as a button prevented her from matching one his favorite characters from the series. It was too bad, as other than Suon Jiraiya seemed to either make his female characters up full cloth, or made them composites of women he knew. Frankly, Suon's stand-ins weren't that interesting to Kakashi, but hey, as long as it got Jiraiya to keep writing, Kakashi wasn't going to complain. Too bad it made fulfilling one of his fantasies so difficult, although he would settle for a beautiful woman in that dress from book 1. Sama. Kakashi-sama, the Amma look-alike asked, looking slightly worried. Letting his blush fade, Kakashi gave her a grin and said, "Yes. The council has questions they wish to ask you." The Amma look-alike answered. Taking that as his cue, Kakashi nodded, pulled out his book and started to walk away. Who knew when they wanted to talk to him? Either way, he was getting to one of the best parts in the book. Flipping a page, Kakashi felt a blush started forming and a giggle left his lips as he read what Rin was saying to Karamu. "Kakashi-sama, they wish to talk with you now," the Amma look-alike said in annoyed tone. "Oh," Kakashi replied, "let's not keep them waiting then." Striding in, Kakashi took in the exasperated glares, bored stares and annoyed glances. With a simple shrug of his shoulder and a, "Yo," Kakashi played one of his favorite games, twitting the council's nose. What followed was drilling on Temari and what he gleaned from the trip with her. No, she wasn't a flight risk. She was only as likely to kill Naruto as any other woman who married him was. Yes, she seemed capable of handling Chunin duties. No, he hadn't noticed her dress size. Why should he care what her favorite food was? The Aburame elder had seemed disappointed to hear about her aversion to insects. Not to mention her utter lack of fear over marrying Naruto. Kakashi had grinned at the elder's line of questioning. He now had something to tease Kurenai about at the Junin sensei's meeting. Reading underneath, it was pretty obvious her student Shino thought Temari was pretty good looking and he wouldn't have minded the arranged marriage. Taking the scroll with details about the public ceremony and the money from Hiyashi, Kakashi held his sigh of relief in until he was out the door. Then it was out with his book. After all, he had gotten to a good part. Ignoring Hiyashi's palpable hatred, Kakashi whistled lightly as he headed to his office. A hole in the wall, it served an important purpose for Kakashi by hiding paperwork he didn't want to deal with. Albeit neatly organized so when he had to deal with it he could find it. Thumbing through the stacks on Team 7, Kakashi finally found the one about the briefing materials for New Genin. Unfortunately for Kakashi, the meeting he had missed was to collect the essential briefing material for his team. Then again, it wasn't like he had passed any other teams previously and hadn't expected to pass Team 7. He could predict their reactions now if showed up with those dated scrolls. Of course, he could prepare individual scrolls with the jutsus plus a few others on them along with a few suggested training hints and study suggestions. That would pass master, and he could throw Sakura off by mentioning that he wanted the team to focus on teamwork before going to individual study. Actually, he could have fun with this. Naruto was going to be shocked by the sheer number of theory scrolls Kakashi was going to assign him to read. An evil grin on his face, Kakashi started writing out the individual training regimes he wanted to impose on them. He'd test Temari extensively before he'd write up a scroll for her too. This teaching stuff really wasn't too hard. Iruka had been exaggerating its difficulty. One just had to think of it as a torture exercise by attacking the student's weaknesses. Sasuke was going to go into shock at the suggestion to train in seduction and intelligence gathering techniques. An evil giggle passed Kakashi's lips. This was downright fun. Oh, how he was going to enjoy tomorrow. Temari grimaced as she poked through the cupboards and the refrigerator. Apart from the milk, the only other food than ramen was a generic breakfast cereal and a half loaf of bread. She would have to go shopping later. Stocking up on the basics would suck up a fair bit of her available cash. That's when the thought struck her, she was supposed to be getting engaged and then married to Naruto. Nothing like getting him used to the idea of who held the purse strings. Sipping away at her coffee while she waited for her toast to finish, Temari watched Naruto munch mechanically through his breakfast cereal, some sort of brown flaky material that looked like sawdust. The panda cap, she had to admit, was kind of cute. Smiling slightly, Temari, who had gotten showered and dressed before coming downstairs, got ready to dig her claws into Naruto. If she could get the old insane Gaara to decently follow her will, at least on household issues, Naruto shouldn't be any trouble. After he finished draining a glass of milk, Temari spoke up in a sweet tone, "We need to buy groceries, Naruto. So I'll need you to get your wallet." Yawning heavily, the still half-asleep Naruto looked at Temari for a moment with hooded eyes, then replied, "I'll bring down Gama-chan." Smacking his lips, Naruto moved at a half-speed out of the kitchen and upstairs. Temari let a grin cross her face. This was going well. Naruto obviously responded to orders well in the morning. Idly speculating about the future, Temari felt some of her tension leaving. Naruto was nothing but a young teenager at this point, cheerful and hyperactive. He wasn't actively hostile or trying to dominate her like a lot of men did to women. Her situation could be worse, Temari knew, with the lack of clan elders to pressure and control either of them. Then again, no clan meant no backup, and it wasn't as if Gaara was around. Dragging himself downstairs, Naruto handed Temari a very full frog wallet before heading back upstairs. Opening it up and counting the money, Temari was shocked. Either he was saving up for something expensive or Naruto was saving nearly all of what he earned. Running through a mental list of what she wanted to buy, Temari did a rough guess as to how much it would cost and counted out the money. Closing the still full frog, Temari reacted instantly when she felt the air move. Flicking a kunai into her hands, Temari rolled off her chair and found Kakashi drinking a mug of her coffee while reading his perverted book. Reacting instantly, Temari launched the kunai at the book. Leaning away so it missed, Kakashi paused for a moment and said in a bland tone, "Morning." After a growl, Temari said in an icy voice, "No porn in the house." Sighing, Kakashi put his book away in his jacket. Women were so picky about his books, it wasn't as if he was peeping on them like Jiraiya did. Taking another sip of the coffee, Kakashi in a calm tone added, "Good coffee. I'll have to remember to come by in the mornings for a cup." As Temari gave him an icy glare, he sighed. Most people just didn't understand him. Pulling out the scroll, Kakashi passed it to Temari and the money pouch. The scroll contains the details for the ceremony in 6 days. The money is to cover expenses to prepare for it. Oh, and you have the rest of the day to finish unpacking. Tell Naruto to come to our meeting spot at the usual time today. He can take you there tomorrow. As Kakashi vanished, leaving behind an empty mug, Temari blinked and unrolled the scroll. She might as well read it and get ready. As she cracked the scroll, Temari felt her mood turn sour. This engagement treaty signing was an exercise in humiliation for her in the sand. The council wanted her to down bow before everybody Konoha and publicly submit herself to Naruto, to vow to bring forth as many children as possible for the Leaf. The ignominy, the sheer groveling, weak-minded words the Leaf Council wanted her to spout. Even worse were the words Naruto was to speak to her. Rage started building in Temari. She was a proud kunoichi of the sand, one who killed without mercy in battle and with one assassination under her belt. The hell she was going to spout this crap. Grabbing her fan, Temari stalked out to the backyard. A practice ring had been set up inside it, and several logs were set up as targets. Snapping open her fan, Temari built up her chakra and unleashed a blast of slicing air, slamming it into one of the logs and turning it into shreds. With the momentum of her first move, Temari twirled her fan about her and unleashed a miniature tornado that captured the wooden shards of her first target. Slamming her closed fan into the ground, Temari used her chakra to maneuver her jutsu to suck up another log. Her fan aided her in creating fiercely concentrated blasts of wind, but Temari hadn't been Baki's student for nothing. Running through a series of hand seals, Temari shouted out, "Fuden, Torasum no Jutsu." Shoving a large amount of chakra into the jutsu, the tornado grew more fierce as tiger shapes suddenly appeared in a chain on the outside of the tornado. The sounds of wood being shredded by the jutsu provided an interesting counterpoint to the birds chirping nearby. Still not satisfied, Temari ran through another series of hand seals before calling out, Fuden, Beizukei's no Jutsu. The result was impressive as the tornado split apart into 5 and swept up the remaining logs into deadly winds. Few things would survive inside the maelstrom Temari created. She was using a combination of Chunin and Junin level jutsus that was deadly. Keeping the jutsus up for over a minute as Temari let her rage power her jutsus. As the fierce winds sent a backlash of wind pouring outward and sending leaves flying, Temari felt the wind flow over her. Caught up in her element and emotions, Temari didn't realize she had pushed beyond her chakra limits until she felt her knees crumble as soon as her jutsus disappeared. Slipping downwards to the ground, Temari only had time to let out a single word, Kuso. Naruto had seen the fierce winds from the bathroom as he brushed his teeth. Drawn like a moth to a flame to check out the jutsus, not to mention the moment of panic Naruto felt that Temari was under attack got him moving. With his toothbrush still in his mouth, Naruto tore down the stairs and outside. By the time Naruto got to the backyard, he realized it was Temari simply practicing. Naruto's jaw dropped and his toothbrush fell to the ground as he stared in awe at Temari. The kunoichi cut an impressive figure as her blonde hair flowed freely in the wind, and her eyes stared ahead in a determined gaze. As his heart beat in his chest, Naruto came to 2 conclusions about Temari. She was an awesome ninja, and she was one of the most beautiful women in the world. The fact that she was going to marry him was just icing on the cake. Sakura suddenly had dropped to number 2 on his list of favorite kunoichi. After years of frustration on his part, it couldn't be that much of a surprise. Even after saving her life lots of time, all Naruto had gotten was respect from Sakura. In fact, Naruto had been starting to come to the conclusion that what he really wanted was to be friends with her. That feeling solidified when Naruto saw Temari turn pale and collapse to the ground. Temari-chan. Naruto called out in shock as he ran to her. Kneeling down, Naruto quickly checked her pulse and other vital signs. Kakashi, for all his faults as a teacher, had ensured Team 7 was up on field first aid. That had actually been about one of few things Kakashi had actually taught them. So Naruto was able to diagnose chakra exhaustion as the cause of Temari's collapse. However, given her stable heart rate, it wasn't a deadly case. Acting quickly, Naruto created a set of cage bunchins and nodded as they leapt into action following his plan. 2 split off to go find Iruka-sensei. 1 went to tell the Tem and Sakura-chan that Naruto was dealing with something. 1 went inside to get the kettle going and make ramen, one of the good ones. Another grabbed Temari's fan and opened the doors. Nodding to the last bunchin, Naruto lifted Temari up in a 2-man lift, and slowly moved her into the house and up into her room. After carefully placing Temari on her futon, Naruto motioned for the bunchin to remove her sandals. Slipping her beneath the covers, Naruto brushed his hand over Temari's forehead. Her skin was slightly rough from the sun and sand but still in good shape. Her heart-shaped face was softened by unconsciousness into an almost sweet look, far different from the controlled, confident face she wore awake. Taking a seat on the floor, Naruto simply sat for a few minutes before a clone brought up a bowl of ramen still steaming away on a tray. Putting it down, the bunchin nodded and said, "I found this scroll on the table as well downstairs," before it released the jutsu puffing out of existence. That was when Naruto suddenly knew that Iruka was on his way over, having been found by the clone at Iruka's favorite training ground. Grunting, Naruto was struck by the realization that he knew what his cage bunchins did after releasing themselves. He was going to have to talk to Kakashi-sensei about this. Before he got around to that, however, Naruto realized that Temari had grown slightly and was starting to come around. As a wave of pain passed through her head, Temari groaned slightly as she came back to consciousness. She had drained her chakra before on occasion, so Temari recognized her symptoms. Her senses hurting, the pins and needles throughout her body, the soft bed. Pausing her mental inventory, Temari considered the soft bed, the scent of miso soup in the air and the sound of someone humming. Turning her head, Temari blinked as an orange blob came into focus as Naruto. Seeing her blink, Naruto said softly, "You burned off all your chakra. So I brought you up to your room." Rocking on his heels, Naruto continued on, "I also made you some ramen. You should have some of the broth first, it will help you out." Nodding, Temari tried to shift herself upright, but that task proved beyond her current strength. Frowning, Naruto ran out of her room and into his own. Moments later, Naruto brought out his pillow and futon roll. Can I help get you upright? Naruto asked quietly. Unsticking her tongue from the roof of her mouth, Temari whispered, thanks. Flashing her a warm grin, Naruto moved in and lifted Temari up and slipped his futon and pillow behind her. Now at least somewhat upright, Temari grinned slightly as Naruto placed the tray on her lap. Trying to lift her arm, Temari frowned as her hand shook, but it wasn't bad enough to spill the broth from the spoon. Taking a few spoons of broth, Temari felt better for it. Slurping up the noodles, Temari slowly worked her way through the bowl and finished off the broth. Still lightheaded and drained, Temari was finally able to think. Thank you, Naruto. Temari said softly. Grinning, Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said in a cheerful mood, you're welcome. Chakra exhaustion isn't a good thing, is it? Taking the tray, Naruto put it carefully away on the floor and shifted slightly. Your jutsus were amazing. You were amazing too, Temari-chan. Blinking, Temari stared into Naruto's bright blue eyes filled with emotions that just drew her in. The admiration, concern, and Temari was sure just a touch of lust. Not that she minded, after all Temari knew she was marrying him, it was good to know he was interested in her. With a slight smile on her face, Temari said quietly, come close so I can thank you properly, Naruto. Scooting in closer, Naruto moved in close to Temari. Leaning in, Temari kissed Naruto lightly on the cheek, and she smiled slightly as she felt the blood rush to his cheek, and followed it up with another one on his lips. Naruto's lips tasted like salt, mint and the coppery tang of blood, the last Temari found most exciting. In turn, Temari tasted of coffee and cinnamon. Pulling back, Temari watched Naruto sit there absolutely frozen in shock. That Temari was sure was his first kiss by a woman, given his reaction. Even for a fairly chaste kiss, it was nice to know he had liked it. Letting out a happy sigh, Naruto turned to look into Temari's eyes, and in a heartbreaking moment Temari realized just how fragile this boy, her future husband, could be. Yet his very fragility was his strength. To those he cared about, Naruto would give his entire heart. For his friends, for his precious people, Naruto would go to his limits and beyond. In turn, those precious to him could shatter his heart in an instant. Temari realized that she was now one of them. Taking his hand in hers, Temari said quietly, I wasn't happy to be married off as part of a treaty, but I am glad it was to you, Naruto. Sighing again, Naruto blinked and his happy mood returned. We're both a little young for this, no. Though I am happy it's you instead of someone else. Suddenly a grin passed across his face and Naruto added, at least it wasn't your doll-using brother. Now that would have been weird. Letting out a short laugh, Temari's eyes twinkled at the thought of Kankuro being mistaken for a girl. After all, he did play with dolls. Sneezing, Kankuro had to curse as he looked at the damage done by the sneeze. His newest acquisition, a third Cage Special Edition action figure, was no longer in mint condition. The plastic window of the box was now streak-marked. Sighing, Kankuro carefully placed the now near-mint figure onto his near-mint shelf. Feeling irritated, Kankuro turned to his comfort. Barbie was going to mix and match her fashion items in front of Ken, and after all she had a big mission coming up and wanted to look good. As Gaara viewed his brother via the third eye jutsu, he wondered if he was the saner of the two brothers. After all, now he wanted to be social and kunoichi were starting to be interesting to look at. Somehow playing with dolls and dressing them up in different outfits was just weird. Sure, he had been a bloodthirsty monster lost in his loneliness until Naruto knocked him out of it, and Gaara knew he wasn't sane, but then again few nin were. Releasing his jutsu, Gaara decided that he needed to give his bear a hug. Then he was going to find Baki and train with his new teammate. He only hoped this one was going to last longer. The previous three had resigned after just one session. After all, the Desert Wedgie wasn't as bad as the 1000 Years of Pain technique. Plus, he wasn't using the explosive tag version. The few scrolls on humor he had read did show that physical humor was the easiest to learn, and Gaara was starting to figure it out. It was into the laughter that followed Naruto's statement that Iruka walked in on with a concerned look upon his face. What's the matter, Naruto? It was then that Iruka noticed the two holding hands, Temari's pale face contrasting with Naruto's slightly flushed one. Doing a double take at the sight, Iruka felt some of the stress he had been feeling since this whole engagement business had occurred leave him. The two were forming a bond spurred on no doubt by the realities laid on them but also by the openness of Naruto's heart. Temari-chan has a case of chakra depletion, Naruto said in a concerned tone. She was using some powerful wind jutsus to completely shred the target logs. Grimacing a little, Temari noticed the scroll that set her off to one side. Kakashi-san dropped off a scroll with the details of the public engagement ceremony. I wasn't particularly pleased at the lines I was given. Catching Temari's tone, Iruka picked up the scroll and scanned through it until he came across the section that set Temari off. They had pulled out the really tradition wording and given Temari's reaction, she was pissed. For a kunoichi, who given her abilities was more comfortable on the battlefield than in the tea room, it would be humiliating. Groaning a little, Iruka read Naruto's lines. Kami, they wanted Naruto to say he would make all her decisions for her. I'll look into this. Frankly, I don't blame you. I wouldn't say this out loud either. Beyond that, how are you two doing? Iruka asked in a calm tone. Naruto didn't even bother to answer as he focused totally on Temari, his eyes soaking her in. Drained with a full list of things to finish off today. I was going to buy the basics for the kitchen then finish unpacking. Temari admitted after a minute resting. Fortunately, the academy was closed since almost all the teachers were on missions. Iruka had the week clear though, having his latest mission cancelled. Fortunately, I'm free today, so I'll help. Actually, if you come up with a grocery list, I can clear that out of the way while you rest. Nodding, Temari pulled out the money she had grabbed earlier from her dress and laid it on the futon. I'll write it out, but I was going to buy a stock of basic goods. Nodding, Iruka pulled out a scroll and a pen then said, Right, Naruto, let's give Temari a couple of minutes, we'll go clean up the backyard. Nodding, Naruto slowly stood and removed his hands from Temari after he gave it a squeeze. Moving with reluctance out of Temari's room, Naruto gave her a concerned look before shutting the door. As he led Iruka outside, Naruto remained quiet until they reached the backyard. Iruka, with a slight smile on his face, asked Naruto, You're starting to like Temari, aren't you? A deep sigh was Naruto's only response. Ah, so have you kissed yet? Iruka asked in an interested tone. The bright blush Naruto wore was confirmation enough for Iruka. Iruka could only grin. 2 days in and he was already getting a kiss. Teenage hormones were speeding things along for the pair. It was that thought which shook him. Teenage hormones, and early marriage. Kami. Naruto was going to need the talk. He just wasn't ready to be a parent or a husband yet, and there was going to be plenty of pressure on the two to have children early. Wincing, Iruka ran over in his mind just when to take Naruto aside and talk about a subject on which his experience was admittedly limited. Too bad Kakashi couldn't give him the talk. Wait a moment, Iruka thought. It was a duty of Junin senseis to go over that. Not to mention ensuring Kunoichi attended rape prevention and recovery classes. That subject always haunted his thoughts whenever a Kunoichi graduated. It was one of the more common dangers they ran into if captured or undercover. Hell, he'd have a word with Kurenai about that subject for Temari as well. He didn't know what San's procedures were, but he was sure it wouldn't hurt to introduce Temari to Leaf's contraceptive regime. Why was he the one stuck thinking of these issues? Oh yes, he was the only sane, rational and organized ninja in Konoha who cared about Naruto. Kakashi, may he be cursed with the Konohamaru squad as his next genin team, was in Iruka's opinion a lazy, disorganized pervert who shouldn't be led anywhere near a genin squad. Iruka-sensei, it looks like we'll need to replace the logs. There's nothing but sawdust. Naruto called out, interrupting Iruka's thoughts. Staring at the pile of sawdust, Iruka winced. What had been several stout pillars of hardwood had been shredded. With a low whistle, Iruka ran his hand through the pile. Naruto, remember to never get Temari mad at you. Wind elemental techniques are deadly. Wind element techniques? Naruto asked, slightly confused. Why are they deadly? Falling naturally into his teaching mode, Iruka began speaking as he looked directly at Naruto. There's 5 elements that form the basis of everything in the world: fire, earth, water, wind, and lightning. The 5 great nations and hidden villages match to these elements. Right, like Temari came from Suno, which is in Wind Nation, to Konoha, which is in the Fire Nation. Naruto responded, nodding his head. Right, out of the 5 elements, wind is considered the war element. Iruka got out before Naruto interrupted. But what about fire or lightning elements? Fire can burn really bad. Naruto asked as his face scrunched in concentration. All the elements are powerful, Naruto. The reason why wind is called the war element is that its attacks are deadly, but it also provides a strong defense by diverting attacks. It's balanced but also highly noticeable. Water, on the other hand, is known as the assassination element. Iruka said, pausing for a moment before continuing on. Since Temari focuses on wind attacks, it's most likely her primary element. Primary element? Naruto asked, slightly confused. Everyone is aligned to a particular element, Naruto. Whenever they use ninjutsus of that element, it's easier to control and is stronger. Take for instance Sasuke. His primary element is fire, so whenever he uses fire attacks, they are stronger and easier to control than other elemental attacks he knows. Iruka continued lecturing. How do you know he's a fire element? Naruto asked in a confused tone. He's an Uchiha, they always been strong fire users. Iruka continued on in a somewhat stern tone, plus he didn't skip class the day we tested for elements. Oops, Naruto said in a chagrined tone. So how do you learn what element you are? Pulling out a thin sheet of paper from his pocket, Iruka handed it to Naruto, who grasped it as he looked at it uncertainly. Simply channel chakra into the paper and it will show you which element you are. Lifting up a piece of paper in his hand, Iruka demonstrated as the slip quickly became soaked. I'm a primary water element. So my ninjutsus are easier and stronger to use than my other elemental attacks. Nodding, Naruto channeled his own chakra into the paper, which ripped in two. Hey, that's interesting, you're a wind element. Seems you and Temari match up. Iruka said with a grin. Very few leaf nins were primary wind elementals. In fact, the only one he knew of was Asuma. Hey, cool. I've so got to tell Temari. Naruto declared happily as he jumped into the air. First, however, let's grab a fresh practice log first and set it up. Iruka said, shaking his head. Yosh. Naruto called out as he ran into the back of the yard where a large pile of uncut wood was stuck. 30 minutes later, the two had a hefty pillar set up and in the ground. Slipping into Temari's room, Naruto held back his cheerful greeting as he saw Temari sleeping quietly on her side, curled around his rolled-up futon. Moving in quietly, Naruto took the list Temari had written and the cash. Passing them to Iruka, Naruto stopped and thought for a moment as before creating a shadow clone, pressing his hands to his lips for silence. Naruto motioned for the clone to stand guard in the open doorway. With a final nod, Naruto followed Iruka out of the house. Racing up to the bridge, Naruto called out, "Oh, Sakura-chan, Sasuke, am I late?" That was when Kakashi appeared behind Naruto and ruffled his hair. "You're late, Naruto." With a mischief look in his eye and a smirk on his face, Kakashi asked, "So what's the reason?" With a concerned look on his face, Naruto answered, "Temari-chan was pissed at what they want her to say at the ceremony and took it out on the target posts by shredding them with her best jutsus and overdid it. I had to treat her for chakra exhaustion." Then with a smile on his face, Naruto added in a proud tone, "They were completely reduced to sawdust. It was awesome. Oh, and I'm wind element like Temari-chan. At least Naruto has a good reason, Kakashi-sensei, and he did send a bunchin ahead to tell us he was running late." Sakura spoke up. "Unlike some people. That in your bunchin proved useful as a target dobi." Sasuke added. Temari-chan already you move fast, Naruto. I'll accept your tardiness this once." Kakashi grinned innocently behind his mask. "Ha, like you're ever on time, sensei." Inner Sakura grumbled. Was Sasuke's contribution. "Thanks, sensei." Naruto said in relief. "Oh yes, that reminds me. Having worked on teamwork before the Chunin exam, I've prepared a course of individual study for all three of you. I expect you to work on this outside of the time we work as a team. I'll follow up weekly on your progress," Kakashi said in a rather pleased tone as he tossed each of them a scroll. As each of his students unrolled their own, it was Sasuke who reacted first to Kakashi's delight. "Seduction training," Sasuke snarled in an icy hiss. Amused by Sakura's blush, Kakashi answered in a cheerful tone, "A fundamental course any ninja should have, especially Hunter Nin. It's much easier to gather information from friendly sources." Putting the pieces together, Sasuke gave a grunt. Though it wouldn't make him stronger, it would help him find his brother. It wasn't as if that man would just turn up in Konoha so Sasuke could kill him when he was ready. Sakura, having gotten over her mental image of joining Sasuke in seduction training, groaned as she read her scroll. "This is lethal." "Nope. I simply asked Guy for a training regime that was the most efficient way to build stamina. Besides, I turned down his offer to give you one of his training outfits. Kakashi's grin couldn't get any wider at the moment. Unless you'd like one, of course. Remember the Chunin motto. Shuddering at the thought of wearing one of the Green Beast's outfits, Sakura murmured, "Run in the fields." This would make her stronger. Maybe with this she wouldn't be left behind anymore. Naruto, much to Kakashi's surprise, wasn't howling in outrage over his scroll. Kakashi-sensei, I've got a question for you. When I used my Kage Bunshin this morning to find Iruka-sensei, I remembered what happened with it when it released the jutsu. Why was that? Impressed by this, Kakashi thought for a moment about Naruto's signature jutsu. Then it struck him. Naruto obviously hadn't bothered to learn the theory behind Kage Bunshin, just the technique. Provided the clone isn't destroyed, you learn everything it knows when you or it releases the jutsu. This makes Kage Bunshin useful for spying, but you don't get the chakra you spent making it back. You'd get the clone's experience for chakra control, molding and alteration exercises as well. Yosh! Naruto shouted as he leapt in the air, I'm learning all sorts of things today. Shaking his head at Naruto's antics, Kakashi realized Naruto had discovered a perfect way to tackle all the scrolls he had assigned. He just hoped Naruto wouldn't overdo it, and fry his head from information overload. Since Kakashi couldn't be bothered to do much today, he decided to have them practice chakra alteration. Right, I want you three to practice chakra alteration today. Don't overdo it today since we have a quick mission lined up for tomorrow. Kakashi said as he ran them through the basics of their individual elements. Sakura was trying to ignite a leaf while Naruto was trying to cut one. Before he left, Kakashi blinked as he saw Naruto create a horde of clones to practice the technique. Sasuke just glared at Naruto before demonstrating his skill at altering his chakra by igniting his leaf in his right hand then into lightning with his left, results of Kakashi's instruction in the Chidori. Ah, the joys of youth, Kakashi thought to himself as he headed out to check on Temari. What had he been doing at 13? Ah yes, leading raids on cloud lines. That had been a good war, quick, well planned and led on the Leaf side against an enemy that was having a civil war in its command. Iruka noticed Kakashi land in the backyard and poke around in the pile of sawdust centered on the practice ring. Opening the kitchen window, Iruka called out, Kakashi, you might as well come in. Kakashi nodded and smoothly moved inside, joining Iruka in the kitchen. Now where does she store the coffee? Kakashi asked in a questioning tone. The coffee this morning really had been first rate. Iruka, however, merely snorted. Since I don't feel like dying, I'm not telling. Naruto informed me they made a deal. He doesn't touch her coffee cupboard, she doesn't touch his ramen cupboard. Waving Temari's coffee addiction and her protective streak over it aside, Kakashi suggested in an innocent tone, I was merely thinking of brewing a pot for her. If I get a cup out of it, that's pure luck. Right. Iruka said in a dubious tone. Besides, you're too late, she had lunch a half-hour ago and is asleep again. As he spoke, Iruka moved quickly, putting away clean pots and pans into various drawers and cupboards. She'll be fine by tomorrow though, I'm sure. Naruto got to her right away. He's falling for her pretty fast. Kakashi said in a mildly interested tone. Yes, that's a problem in and of itself. Iruka sighed as he finished putting away the last of the dishes. They're both being publicly made into a couple and will be under pressure to at least have one child fairly quickly. While I won't speak for Temari, I do know Naruto has limited knowledge of what sex actually involves and all the consequences entailed. He did invent the Waroke no Jutsu. Kakashi said with a slight smirk. I won't deny that Naruto's interested in the opposite sex, he just found a fairly typical male weakness and exploited it. Apart from getting attention, he developed it to use against perverts. The third mentioned to me once that was how Naruto managed to get his hand on the forbidden scroll. Iruka rebutted in a calm tone. He certainly is surprising, though that jutsu has sent the prudes like Hiyashi screaming. I heard Kurenai was torn between wanting to tear a strip off him for degrading women or getting jealous that Naruto had come up with a brilliantly effective genjutsu. Kakashi chuckled for a moment after his last comment. Right, but he's still going to need the full talk on sex, and that job is one done by Junin senseis. Iruka said with a shark-like grin. Somehow I doubt Temari will appreciate it if I give him the traditional version handed done to me. Taking the team down to a port town, liquoring them up and hiring them a geisha each. Though it would interesting to figure out which team Sasuke bats for finally. Kakashi finished with an evil grin. He just prefers his women older. Iruka said with a smile on his face as he shared Naruto's information, about 6 or so years older. Hey, good to know, Kakashi said as he scratched his chin. I'll give all 3 of them the talk. I'm finally starting to get a hand on this teaching business. I just torture them via their weaknesses as ninja. I've got Naruto reading large numbers of scrolls on a wide range of subjects. Watching them squirm in embarrassment will be fun. Though what isn't fun is the crap they want Naruto and Temari to spout off at the engagement ceremony. I looked it up and someone decided to pull out a 200-year-old version for marriage treaties between clans. The last series of marriage treaties in Konoha had a radically different tone for the engagement or marriage ceremonies. I've copied out several versions for reference. Iruka stated vehemently. I didn't read the scroll itself, mind if I look at it? Kakashi said in a mild tone. Pulling the scroll from his vest, Iruka tossed it to him. Kakashi caught it easily and unfurled it. Quickly scanning it over, Kakashi replied dryly, yes, I can see why Temari decided to burn out her chakra this morning. I haven't read anything this outdated since the Ika Ika historical issue. Given her weapon of choice and abilities, she's continuing on in the tradition of wind battle maidens, it really isn't appropriate. The historical accounts of that order definitely placed them against the norm of their time. Iruka paused a moment as a thought struck him. I glanced over a couple of scrolls of marriage treaties with the order from deceased clans. Now they had some really different language. You do say, Kakashi in an interested tone, find them again, would you? What Naruto's and Temari actually say to each other won't affect the treaty provided they agree to eventually marry each other as per orders. Besides, he does have a reputation as the most surprising ninja to keep up. Nodding, Iruka moved into the living room to sort through the piles of scrolls and boxes, a good portion of which seemed to be random gifts. Not that Iruka was too surprised. The treaty had been negotiated quickly and he had figured out most kunoichi would pile gifts on the unfortunate one, chosen out of relief that it hadn't been them. Kakashi, at the sight of more work to be done, grinned and waved goodbye to Iruka as he left, leaping out the window and into the trees. Neji watched Hinata run through another endless series of hand strikes against the training post. After his lose to Naruto, Neji had put aside his fatalism and his willingness to view the Hyugas strictly in terms of branch and main families. Surprisingly, Neji realized that Hinata actually cared for him personally, not just because he was a cousin but for who he was an individual. It was strange to think about, but Neji realized that Hinata naturally liked people and was genuinely friendly with almost all she met. Even more interesting for Neji was that he realized just why Hinata would fail miserably when sparring against Hiashi, or Hanabi. She literally could not hurt those she loved. Her willingness to change herself was good, but Neji doubted she could ever kill her heart. The best she could ever hope to be was a lioness fiercely protecting her cubs, not a ruthless hunter. Against himself, however, Neji would not allow such a weakness. No, not when he was here to train her. However, that was not his primary concern right now. He needed Hinata to get over her crush on Naruto and focus on her training. A task in which Neji knew he was lacking any experience or competence. Though he was 14, Neji hadn't bothered thinking about or even feeling much about love or even lust. He was focused utterly on his own development, pursuing it with a ruthless determination. It was the one reason Lee would never beat him. Neji trained equally as hard. The emotions of a 13-year-old girl were completely outside of his experiences. Tenten, like Lee, was utterly focused on improving her own skills. Hinata, stop, Neji said in his blunt tone. Finishing off one last series of strikes, Hinata turned to face Neji and asked, yes, Neji-Nisan. We are finished for now. However, I must talk with you about an issue disrupting your focus. Naruto and Temari's marriage, Neji said in a calm tone without hint of emotion. The flash in Hinata's eye and shift in posture told Neji everything he needed to know. She had feelings for Naruto and Hinata was capable of hating another. We will talk over Dango. I know a place on our way to the meeting. Dango, Neji thought with some irony, was a rather common treat the two Hyugas both enjoyed, a treat more uptight Hyugas would view as below them. So it was in a somewhat cold silence the pair made their way to the Dango shop. After devouring their first sticks, Neji began the conversation. I can see the qualities in Naruto that would make him romantically interesting for you. Indeed, if things were not as they are, I would help things along if only to help you. That and I would have enjoyed the chance to send certain members of the main family into shock. Certain main family members would have gone into hysterics at Hinata dating Naruto. He himself had confronted Guy after things had settled down about the chakra he had seen in Naruto. It hadn't taken him long to put things together after Guy's reluctant confirmation that Naruto did indeed have a seal. With a bit of research, Neji realized that only a Jinchuriki could accomplish what Naruto had done. No other explanation would satisfy his second source of chakra, stamina and regenerative abilities. The Uchiha's curse seal was different. It had twisted, concentrated and stored the boy's own chakra. Naruto having the Kyuubi sealed within did much to explain most people's reaction to him. It spoke much for Naruto's character that he didn't give in to the demon. Neji wasn't sure he wouldn't have misused that particular power. He should not have been the one to marry the enemy. Naruto deserves better, Hinata said in a quiet yet fierce tone. Neji, instead of agreeing, pushed the conversation ahead, regardless of his agreement with her last statement. That matters not now. Naruto has been assigned that mission. From what I have gathered, Naruto will work tirelessly to avoid failing a mission. Even if it is a treaty marriage. Hinata scowled at this. Naruto's famous persistence worked at cross purposes with her heart's dream. Biting fiercely into her dango, Hinata waited for Neji to continue on. More importantly, regardless of your romantic feelings for Naruto, he is your friend first. He is a friend going through a significant change in his life. Do not dishonor your friendship over an action of which he has no control. To be blunt, let go of your crush for him, that opportunity has passed. Neji finished calmly. Eyes closed, Hinata could only stutter. He was the one I wanted. Not out of duty, or because he was popular, but because I liked him even when no one else did. He is merely the first of our generation to be married out of duty, Hinata. We are shinobi of the leaf. We are called to serve even with our bodies. For those of us in prominent clans, our ability arranged marriages are often how that form of service occurs. We both will likely walk that path if our clan does not get to us first. There are other forms that duty can take. Neji answered honestly. He had occasionally pondered this very question, trying to determine who was better off, himself or Lee. Lee had the freedom to love and marry whoever he chose, while Neji was bound, however, by his status as a Hyuga. Though vexing, Neji only knew for certain that both he and Lee were better off than Tenten. She, Neji was certain, would likely receive the types of mission Kunoichi were called to perform in several years. Using her body as a weapon to kill her targets or get close enough to steal information. Before we continue on to the meeting, I have a final piece of advice. Naruto followed up with me after the invasion to ensure his lesson sunk in. He told me, life isn't fair. All you can do is keep getting up and move on. No amount of crying or heartache will change it. The question you must answer, Hinata, is if you will get up and move on. Neji asked as he finished off their conversation and paid their tab. Hinata was struck by Neji's last remark. If she truly admired Naruto and wished to change herself, wasn't this truly as much of test as standing up to Neji had been? If enjoyed the story, subscribe and press the bell icon for the next part update. Thanks for watching.